I think those of us who are very high masking, we've spent our entire lives translating, making ourselves more intelligible, making ourselves more palatable. So we're not too intense or too much or too
Mm.
sensitive or too emotional or whatever it may be. So to be in spaces where that the effort of translation is removed and there's a sense of being actually known for who we are.
Kristina, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. So, I discovered you by, of course, your content on TikTok and you being diagnosed autism and ADHD later in life, right? And
Yes.
like we were talking earlier, that is such a big topic right now, especially for women.
Yes, it is.
And so, you discovered that you were autistic and ADHD, like I just said, when you were 50.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me what that was like.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I sort of went down a rabbit hole because I was trying to better understand my middle son who was diagnosed ADHD. And this is actually very common that
Mhm.
women discover self-diagnose when
Yes.
they're, when they're learning about their children.
Yeah.
Um, and so the more I read, the more the more the material, and particularly listening to other neurodivergent people, the more I listened to people speak, the more the pennies were dropping. And so I self-diagnosed with autism and ended up going to a clinician who also confirmed ADHD. And this is coming off of 13 years as a psychotherapist, right? And really, decades of my own therapy and a lifetime of trying to understand human experience.
Yes.
So to see something so enormous that eluded my understanding, even though I had devoted my life to it, was really an eye opener. And that's really a reflection of the gaps in the research, the gaps in the stereotypes that we've all been exposed to. The research was primarily conducted on white boys, and so people of color, women, trans, non-binary, queer, like, there's just an enormous population of very, very high masking neurodivergent people who have been completely missed, who've been misdiagnosed, who've gone undiagnosed. So the more I understood, the more this opened up and answered hundreds of unanswered questions about myself, the more I recognized that this was not just about me, it was systemic.
Yes.
And that it was something that, that I had to, to essentially devote my life to. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Like they say hindsight's 2020, right?
Yes.
And so looking back, what patterns are you able to see now, like through your practice before? Like it's missed. I mean, and like you said, like the research was done typically on white boys, right?
Yes.
And so looking back, like I said, what do you see now that you didn't see then? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, I mean, even aside from the research, my training, and I did a lot of advanced training, it wasn't just basic training.
Yeah.
None of it addressed neurodivergence. It just was not a topic. We weren't taught how to look for it. Um, so looking back, what I realized, first of all, is I realized that many of the clients who came to me who had had difficulty forming a therapeutic relationship with other therapists and stayed with me, in hindsight, clearly neurodivergent.
Yeah.
And so there was a level of rapport there that even though on both sides we weren't diagnosed, there was some degree of safety and I think some degree of recognition, even though I
Yes.
didn't have all the language around it. I now look at a lot of ways in which my training led me astray. I look at a lot of the ways in which our training as mental health professionals has a very heavy neurotypical bias. So a lot of the things
Hmm.
were misreading. Like, so I was my overstimulation was misread as anxiety,
Hmm.
right? And
Yes.
I did the same with my clients. eye contact. I I was taught that it was a view of psychological health to be able to maintain more eye
Yep.
contact, right? And so I learned to force that in my own therapy and as a therapist. Um, and, even though that was actually increasing my dysregulation. So I mean, I see many, many things that I had been taught to attribute to trauma, and trauma is in the mix for sure. I mean, there's a
Right.
very, there's a complex interconnection between neurodivergence and trauma, and CPTSD is itself a form of neurodivergence.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I see a large number of people who I was able to help, but wish I had been able to help more.
Yeah.
And I see the gaps I mean, I saw three psychiatrists, one of them for almost 10 years. She never caught it.
Right.
Um, and I look at where the deepest change occurred, I think, with my neurodivergent clients was around the level of empathy and recognition that I could provide. Even without the diagnostic language, there was
Hmm.
something that we were able to, that I was able to mirror in them. Um, but I mean, one of my biggest biggest parts of my mission, I suppose, is really to reach professionals within the mental health field because the whole is so huge
Yes.
in terms of the training. And to the extent that there is training, it is still, again, very outdated because it's based on very, very biased research. And so, yeah, my hope is to really reach clinicians because neurodivergent people are a population in crisis.
Yeah. I completely agree. Um, and I also shared earlier, like I was diagnosed later in life as well, right? And one correlation, and you mentioned this, that I feel like that I have seen is trauma
Yes.
related. Like there's a huge correlation. So let's talk about that. Like, how does that correlate in neurodivergence?
I mean, I think I don't even know that it's been fully mapped, but
Right.
so we start off with a more sensitive nervous system right off the bat. So there's
Yes.
more input getting in, there's greater sensory load, there's greater, so already the system is more vulnerable to
Mm,
experience an event as traumatic. Now we put that nervous system, that human being, within a system not designed for our brains and bodies, right? So now ordinary life, in which, for example, we have children being forced to override their nervous system just to go to school,
yes.
right? And
Yes.
that can be to the point of, it's impacting emotional regulation, it's impacting capacity for speech, it's impacting, and far enough along, because we are talking about the brain, we have even the experience of fragmentation, right? Of ceasing to feel like a coherent self
Right.
because the environments and the routines are not built with a neurodivergent system in mind. So now we have trauma that's chronic, and then we have on top of that the fallout of being part of an oppressed group. And by oppressed, I mean we're in environments that are not designed for us. We are being faced with various kinds of prejudice. The research shows that neurotypical people most often have a negative reaction to neurodivergent people within the first minute, even when we don't
Mm,
speak. And so we talk about things like rejection sensitivity dysphoria, but that's not an irrational response. That's,
right.
that's the fallout of millions of repeated misunderstandings, right? And the
Hmm.
experience of being chronically misunderstood, particularly when we move into the medical system too, like we look at all the co-occurring conditions that are correlated with neurodivergence and the reality that most medical professionals don't have any awareness of any of that. So that we have medical gaslighting, we have then interventions in mental health that are really designed to make us mask more,
Yeah.
right? Because we're
Yes.
not being seen accurately. So and then add to that, the likelihood that you're in a family in which your parents are undiagnosed.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Undiagnosed.
Yes.
You've now
Great
got
point.
the intergenerational trauma that comes from, what they've had to do to survive the systems and how that plays out intergenerationally.
Hmm.
So the trauma is, yeah, it's intricate. It's intricate.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned that you would like to bring the education to therapists and, right, um, awareness and things like that. What do you think that we are missing in training therapists and coaches, and other practitioners?
That is there's a multi-layered answer to that
Hmm.
because I think that there's now at least a public recognition to some degree that this is a population in crisis. Like if we look at the stats on unemployment and suicidality and addiction and reduced life expectancy. So there is an awareness that something has to change at the systemic level. But a lot of the answers being provided for that are like learn more interventions or learn more symptoms and behavioral approaches. That's missing the boat, right? To me, like any systemic issue, we have to go way deeper than that. We can't just stay on the surface and say, let's ask a different set of questions. We got to go all the way under, like, and this is what the Neurodivergent Rising course that I created is really about. It's like, first of all, we got to learn from neurodivergent people. We got to start listening to neurodivergent people. All the research has been performed by neurotypical people, asking neurotypical questions, right? And it's sort of like, are you going to learn about women in a book written by a man? Right? Are you going
No,
to learn about the African American experience, the Black experience from a book written by a white person?
no,
Are you going to
not at
learn about
all.
neurodivergence from a neurotypical person? No, you
Hmm.
cannot. So, we have to really reverse the clinical gaze, which has been pathologizing from the get-go. And we have to also look at the long tradition of psychiatry that pathologizes very specific groups of people. And they are the groups of people who don't fit neatly into the boxes that capitalist, colonial, patriarchal society wants us to
Yep.
fit into, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
homosexuality was a disorder. Women were diagnosed with hysteria because we were reporting sexual abuse or wanted to get an education. Neurodivergent people really reveal how all the systems are broken. And so just like any oppressed group, um, taking the sort of patronizing or saviorist approach, which is, oh, let us help you. It's like, no, we need to learn from you, right?
Right.
Because there has to be a complete exposure of the entire framework through which we understand sanity, and it's broken, right? It's the mental health care
Yes.
system is broken, just like,
Yes.
you know,
Hmm.
that's a big topic and we can go in many different directions with it. But um, so we have to learn from neurodivergent people. We have to recognize that so many of the stereotypes we're operating with are dangerous and false. And we have to look at the entire paradigm that decides who's normal and who's disordered. And, you know, it's not a disorder. So
No.
autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, they're both misnomers. And we have to
Hmm.
really look at the history of the book that contains those disorders. And we have to ask some really fundamental questions about our society. It's not this neat parceled answer that I think a lot of people are looking for. It's not a quick fix.
Hmm.
But my sense is, it's just like we listen to any group, if we listen to, disability advocates, if we listen to, people advocating for women's rights, for children's rights, the
Right.
answer is always going to be of benefit to all of us. It's not about just this group.
The
So
group. Yeah.
neurodivergent people are no different in that respect.
So define, maybe we should have talked about this in the beginning, but define neurodivergence. Like, how would you explain that?
So neurodivergence is a naturally occurring spectrum of differences in neurocognitive function.
Mm,
And I mean, my understanding is mostly around autism and ADHD. However, there are many, many forms of neurodivergence. So,
right.
OCD, CPTSD, Tourette's, there are many, many different forms of neurodivergence. And it's really, it's a function of a very specific culture and a very specific sort of time in that culture that leads us to say this is a disorder as opposed to it's a
Right.
difference.
So do you feel like, I think the typical treatment is, of course, jumping straight to medication, because it's a disorder and something is wrong with them, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I have very mixed feelings about that because I
Hmm.
know that for a lot of people, a lot of ADHDers, medication makes life manageable, makes life
Right.
bearable. So I'm
Right.
not going to come on here and, say that I'm taking a stance anti-medication.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
I have tried ADHD medication because I'm also autistic. It's a lot more complicated, because it tends
Hmm.
to push me even further into hyperarousal. I think there's a place for medication. Um, but it's still, to my mind, can fall under the category of let's make you fit
Yes,
as
that's my
opposed
point.
to what out there needs to change. What
Right.
is it in our systems, in our institutions that needs to change to
Yes.
and again, not just for the benefit of neurodivergent people, but for the benefit of humanity. Like,
Everybody.
yeah,
Yes, I
yeah,
agree
yeah.
completely.
And in terms of medication, when it comes to autism, a lot of particularly autistic women, get misdiagnosed as borderline personality disorder. We sometimes get misdiagnosed as bipolar. So then we're talking about, medication in the case of bipolar that isn't even founded in the right neurobiology.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Makes
And
complete sense.
many of us get treated for anxiety and depression. And, anxiety and depression can be in the mix, but they're secondary. And
Yes.
a lot of the time, what looks like depression is actually autistic burnout. So, that was a huge revelation for me was to learn that autistic burnout is something that's actually physiologically distinct from what we usually talk about when we use the word burnout, which
Mm.
is occupational burnout, which happens to people in adulthood because you've been working too much and you've lost your equilibrium, and
Yeah.
autistic burnout starts in childhood.
Mm.
It starts in
Explain more
childhood.
about that.
Because right from the get-go, the child is being placed in environments in which the brain is being pushed outside of its zone of tolerance,
Yeah.
right? And so when you look at occupational burnout, it's affecting the HPA axis, so it's hormonal, right? When you look at autistic burnout, it's affecting the mitochondria of the cells. It
Mm.
is cellular and it's lifelong.
Right.
And the way that we treat depression is not adequate because the goal is not let's get you rested enough so we can get you back in the environment is what's causing the problem, right?
Yes.
So it's not like get you recovered and get you back out there. It's like out there is not safe. Out there has never been
Right.
safe. And I think that this is, it's I think it's one of the biggest issues with the sort of the double empathy problem, right? There's been this long-term understanding that somehow neurodivergent people, autistic people in particular, are compromised in our capacity to understand neurotypical people. And the double empathy problem really says, well, actually, the translation's going both ways.
Right.
The
Yeah.
translations can be both ways. And there's a way in which I think it can be very, very difficult for people to understand what it feels like to be in acute distress from childhood and trained to hide that
Mm.
because you're told that the environment is safe and normal and you shouldn't be feeling anything wrong.
Right. So, what does autistic burnout look like?
autistic burnout.
Mm-hmm.
So, in retrospect, I have gone through it many times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's deeply terrifying because there's a sort of gradual loss of capacity. It can involve the loss of the ability to find words. So I've had that experience where, it feels like what I imagine dementia might feel like, where
Mm-hmm.
it's impossible to finish a sentence.
Yeah.
Spatial disorientation, going into a store and not being able to find my way out. Lack of capacity to care for oneself in the most basic ways, like the ability to get up, to feed oneself, to shower.
Yes.
Exhaustion so profound that it feels like it's, you know, barely being alive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Suicidal ideation, overwhelm at the prospect of, you know, needing to find a way to function as an adult when it feels completely out of reach, inability to have the energy to socialize, loss of the capacity to mask, um, confusion. There are many, many different ways it shows up, but essentially, if, if we look at the fact that we're talking about an impact on the brain and an impact cellularly in terms of the
Yes.
mitochondria are the energy producing centers of the cell. So this is it is so deep. And it really what it really requires is a complete change of lifestyle.
So what would that look like? Possibly
Well,
examples.
yeah, and so in my case, for example, I mean, in retrospect, like with the 2020 hindsight, I can see that I've had burnouts, the first one, I mean, I probably had pieces of it in elementary school, but then in high school, then in undergraduate, then in graduate school. Um, and really the definitive one in 2025 for me, which is when I have finally had my diagnosis and finally had the right information. Um, I realized that I really had to give up this idea that I would be normal,
Yeah.
that I would live this normal life that is put out there that we are all supposed to aspire to, like that it was not an option, and that all the millions of things I had tried, you know,
Yeah.
psychotherapy, meditation, spirituality, discipline, exercise, diet,
Mm-hmm.
medication, vitamins, all of those things. And I'm not saying none of those things have value. Of course they do,
Right.
but none of them was going to touch this.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to start being very clear with myself about what is my nervous system actually telling me right now? Whatever I think I'm supposed to accomplish today, what is my body actually telling me? And I
Yes.
think that's in some ways the most foundational task for anyone in burnout is I have to change a lifetime habit of overriding what my nervous system is screaming at me, and I have to find a different way to live. So that can mean physical relocation. It will most likely mean being, really reducing certain kinds of activity, including, sensory input, social
Mm-hmm.
input. It can impact what kind of jobs are possible. Um, so for me, I mean, the most dramatic thing is that I'm finally leaving a big city, which I've wanted to do for a very, very long time,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm moving to a place where I can be in nature
Mm.
much more regularly because that is one of the most powerful regenerative factors we have. Um, so yeah, it's essentially looking at whatever I have been taught to expect myself to be able to cope with, what am I actually able to cope with?
Yes.
And what are the
Yes.
implications for my relationships, my lifestyle, my occupation? It's really it's an overhaul. And it's one that has financial implications, obviously, that can be, really frightening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think what happens to so many of us is that we push through, push through, push through, push through, push through, and then the body finally says,
Yeah.
that's not an option anymore.
Yes. I agree. You say nature, of course. I mean, that is one of the most important things, we can do to help. every aspect of, I mean, all of us, right? We need it.
Yes.
So do you find, I mean, do you have a spiritual practice like meditation?
Yeah, so I've had a long-term meditation practice, spiritual practice, and it has transformed my life, and certainly it has um shifted to some degree the intensity of, my physiological
Mm-hmm.
experience. Um and to me it's like my whole life now kind of coming into alignment with that, as opposed to it being something I try to do on the side to mitigate the damage done by what I have to go through every day.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Um, and that's great that you're moving out of the city.
Yeah.
We actually live in the country and nature, and it's a huge part of my life. So, what do you believe is the most common assumption that you see, both in yourself and in people that you work with, that needs to be challenged?
Ooh. I guess it would be that there's something wrong with us.
Yeah,
That
that's
it's
huge.
something that has to be fixed.
Hmm.
That it's a
Yes.
deficiency, it's a disorder, and that really success looks like being able to adapt and being able to pass and being able to mask. And I think that that really, has to be completely dismantled. That whole way of seeing it has to be completely dismantled.
Yes. So, how has this changed what it looks like for you professionally? Um,
Well, I'm not currently practicing as a psychotherapist, but what I am working on is I've created a course called Neurodivergent Rising, and there are
mhm,
two sort of versions of it. One of them is for neurodivergent adults, and this can be people who are actually diagnosed or who are questioning, who are self-diagnosed. And then the other one is for mental health professionals, and a lot of the core curriculum is the same, but it's really, my sense is we have to come at it from so many different angles, because not only do we need to be properly educated about our brains and nervous system because we never have been, but
yes.
we need the neuroscience. We need to understand the synaptic pruning, we need to understand why is someone else experiencing the same environment in such a radically different way than I am.
Yeah.
So the neuroscience helps us give that context, and it helps illuminate so many aspects of life that we haven't been educated around. Then we need to be in neurodivergent community. So we need to learn from neurodivergent people, which is why, I brought on like 9 international guests, all of whom are neurodivergent, to hear their stories, their experience from the inside, to be in community while we're doing it. Because we've been not only isolated, but also gaslit, right? By this
Mm-hmm.
standard that tells us again and again and again, well, we're fine. Why aren't you fine?
Right.
Um, and then it's this really deep dive into psychiatry, like who decided who decided what is disordered? Like let's take a
Yes.
really hard look at the history of that.
Yes.
And who's still deciding, right?
Yeah.
Where are the holes in the research? What are the presumptions about what normal and healthy look like? And normal
Yep.
and healthy look like, very often it's about compliance and obedience and productivity. These are a lot of the metrics on the basis of which we assign normalcy.
Yes.
Um, so this this course and this community that I've designed are really about, the empowerment that comes from actually finally getting the education about our brains and nervous systems that we never received,
Yeah.
being in community with other neurodivergent people and having this is the experience I think that continues to blow me away as I have it myself and witness it in others. Is like, what if I don't have to translate? What if I share how I feel, and there's this other people in the room are all going, "Oh yeah, me too." Right? As opposed to this
Yes.
constant, and I think those of us who are very high masking, we've spent our entire lives translating, making ourselves more intelligible, making ourselves more palatable. So we're not too intense or too much or too
Mm.
sensitive or too emotional or whatever it may be. So to be in spaces where that the effort of translation is removed and there's a sense of being actually known for who we are, as opposed to the mask that we've created over a lifetime. So that's the work that I'm in now. And the push for me is twofold. It's the empowerment of neurodivergent people and the uplifting of our voices.
Mhm.
And then it's reaching and influencing the medical health field, the mental health field, to recognize that the entire framework needs to be questioned, right? It's not just about let me tack on a few facts about autism. That's not going to do the trick.
Yeah.
Well, we got to go deep. And and I think it's fascinating to me because like how autistic is it to get diagnosed autistic and then spend months, spend a year essentially learning everything there is to know about
Yes.
autism, creating right? And so
Yes.
the course really it's like this integration of everything I've done through my career. I started
Hmm.
out doing a PhD in English literature, teaching at the University of Toronto, then I trained as a psychotherapist, then I developed this, incredible deep spiritual practice. Like all
Hmm.
of those pieces are in the works. They're all in the
Right.
mix. Because this is the other thing is we can't it's not just about the transfer of information. It has to be a deep transformation.
Yes.
If we're going to move through, and this means grieving, it means raging, it means touching
Hmm.
into what has it cost us?
Yeah.
What has it cost us to be in a system that is so deeply flawed and dehumanizing?
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, for me, what is unfolding, what I'm witnessing every week, honestly, I could not have imagined.
Yeah.
Um, to see what becomes possible when that gaslighting is stripped away, and there's a sense of recognition and safety and accurate mirroring, and we go through the grief and the rage, and we also go through the exuberance of being in a
Hmm.
space where passion and intensity are welcome, right? And
Yes.
it's not
Yes.
it's not bizarre to be completely obsessed with something and read 18 books about it, and that energy is contagious and it's understood and it's reciprocated.
Yes.
So yeah, it's really it's quite extraordinary.
That's amazing. So, your course, can they get it online or is it like a workshop that's scheduled? How does that work?
So it's 9 modules that are all pre-recorded, and then we have live meetings every week. So
Mm,
there's the
nice.
opportunity to do the modules on your own pace and to interact with the other participants on the learning platform. And then
Hmm.
there's the chance to meet weekly live. So with me and with the group. For the neurodivergent adults, it's access for a full year. So you have a full year to go through the modules and to come to meetings every week. The professional cohort is much more structured. We go through the 9 weeks together, and then there's a
Hmm.
window to finish the final integration assignment, because it is designed to function for continuing education credit. So
Right.
that's it's a more rigorous experience in the sense that you have quizzes to move through and you have a final assignment to move through.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's all self-paced, and that includes, the interviews with the guests who join me from around the world. And yeah, so it's a balance of there's a lot of information transferred, but it's not designed primarily to transfer information. It's really designed to be a kind of initiatory experience, which is like if
Yes.
we strip away all of this programming, who are we really? Right?
Yes.
Who and
Hmm.
what is it like to be on that path with others who are awakening in this very profound way?
Yes. Beautiful. That is, this is so incredibly important.
Yeah.
Um, so tell us, where can we find information on that course?
Yeah, so I actually offer free webinars, so people have a chance to come and see me speak, and ask me questions before they commit to the course. So there are two different ones. One is for neurodivergent adults who are exploring neurodivergence really for personal reasons. And then there's the one for mental health professionals. I'm happy to give you the links for both. So that's the sort of gentle way in for people who are like really want to get a sense of who I am and what to expect. And then, yeah, I'm also happy to give you the link to the course pages because there's tons of information there as well about the guests and the modules and what we cover and what to expect and the hours and all of that.
Perfect. And we can put the links in the description to this episode.
Perfect. Yeah,
So,
wonderful.
mhm. So if you had one thing to communicate to neurodivergent women that was diagnosed later in life, that they are learning to navigate and find their real truth,
Yes.
not the truth of who people expected them to be before, right? What
Yes.
would that be?
You are not broken. You are not too sensitive.
Mm,
You are not too emotional. You are not too intense.
yeah,
You are wired to see patterns. You are wired to calibrate to truth.
yeah,
Your sensitivity to justice is needed in the world. Your intuition is beyond what you have imagined. Come join us, you know. And I don't, by that, I don't necessarily mean come join the course, but don't like seek out other neurodivergent women. Do not assume that the messages that you have received from society have any reflection on who you are. And this is part of the shift that's happening globally now, right?
yeah,
It's very much intertwined with patriarchy because the traits that have been coded feminine have always been labeled disordered. They've
yeah.
always been labeled disordered.
I haven't noticed that.
So yeah, yes, don't give up
Mm,
on finding community. Don't,
yeah,
come find me on social media, Um, don't let the gaslighting pull you away from who you know yourself to be at your core.
yes. Beautiful. Perfect. I love it. I will have all of your information in the description so
Okay.
people can find you. And I mean, I encourage anyone to come seek you out. And I just really, really appreciate this conversation. It's been educational, enlightening, and like I said earlier, it is a message that so many people need. Not only
Yes.
neurodivergence, but also just the awareness. People
Yeah.
just need to know.
Yes.
And so I thank you, Kristina. This has been amazing, and I hope to keep in touch. And again, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. It was so lovely to join you. Thank you for the invitation to be here with you.